I'm Noelle D'Amico from the Workers' Circle. I'm the Director of Social Justice. The Workers' Circle is a Jewish social justice organization that's 125 years young. We've been causing good trouble for a long time, and there's no partner that we value more than the Center for Common Ground, which helps us in all of our postcarding and phone banking and collaborative work. Andrea, how you doing tonight?
I am doing great. Thank you for asking, Noel. I am delighted to be here. We are getting everybody in the room so that we can begin. And I'm thinking about protest. Um, my father was a union leader, and I can remember being like 5 years old and joining my father on union picket lines. And then I protested all through high school, the Vietnam War. Then I wasn't busy for a while. Then the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, there's always a war somewhere. And yeah, protest is a really, really, really critical thing for us to do. So it is a way of advocating. So one of my board members used to say, it is really, really critical that we do work out in the streets as long as we then follow it up with work in the streets, meaning
Yeah, right.
going to talk to the electeds.
I know. And whether you talk to them before you go to protest or after you go to protest, keep talking to them because it's that relationship that you build with them and your staff. We've said it before, we're going to say it again. You really want to be known by them and keep the pressure on and also keep the thanks going when they're doing the right thing.
And every once in a while, you come across those great electeds where they hear you're protesting and they come outside and join you.
That's right. I remember back during the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis debates that were going on in Congress. And right after it failed on the filibuster, Representative Jamal Bowman, who was my representative, came out and joined members of the Workers' Circle who were engaging in civil disobedience following the failure of that vote. And it was so powerful to have a lawmaker get arrested alongside of us peacefully to express our deep displeasure, and real horror at Congress not acting to strengthen our voting rights at such a time. And so sometimes they come out and they'll join you. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to how to plan a protest.
All right. Well, tonight from my team, we've got John Williams, who's going to be sharing slides, and a very, very, very dear friend, former intern turned activist leader, is hanging out with us tonight, Justin Metzler. And then Noel, I know you've got a full team here as well.
Exactly. We've got Fran Rubenson who's going to present in just a little bit, and if you haven't already, you'll meet Fran in the chat. And Rio Taswell is going to talk to us about the upcoming No Kings protests on June the 14th and social media as well at your protests.
And then I see Janice Gay is here. Janice is our Virginia Beach Norfolk Democracy Center leader. She is our paid phone bank team leader. She is our canvassing leader. Everything that has to do with voters in her area, she's one of the leaders, and she's going to be talking to us tonight.
Well, I think one of the really great things is whether folks are on camera or not on camera, whether we're in the chat or we're talking together, that we keep picking up from what we've done before and building on those skills. And I know that our team was talking a lot about how wonderful it was that so many of you either hosted or went to a town hall meeting over these past months. And we really want to encourage you. I know there were some that did, even in the last month, go from effective advocate straight into holding a town hall. Share, if you're one of those people, why don't you go share that in the chat with others? Let folks know the importance of that and how it went, what it was like. Feel free to just dive on in. So this month's focus is really going to be on the First Amendment and our right to protest. This is a very important right. We know that right now, one of the Trump administration's techniques is to try to make people quite afraid. And protest is one way of saying we recognize, even amidst nervousness, that we have rights. We are going to exercise them fully, and we are not going to be quiet. So today we're going to talk about what are some of these attacks on the First Amendment that have been going on. We're going to talk about how to participate in and plan a protest. And we'll talk about some upcoming national protests and next steps. Would you move the slide forward, John? Thanks. So that's what we're up to now. Next slide. So we're going to start off by talking about the First Amendment. Can you go back one slide, John, for me? The First Amendment goes like this. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of people to peaceably assemble to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's really what's going on when we are in the streets. We're asking the government to redress a grievance. We're saying this is not wrong. We want this to happen. And this has been a really central feature. You know, it is the First Amendment. This amendment, in many ways, is the amendment upon which all other amendments are built, because without our freedom to speak our minds, without the ability for us to have a free press and to learn what's going on in our world, without press that's intimidated, and without the right to assemble and make decisions and move publicly to advocate for those decisions, we're not really living in a democracy. Now, this past week, some of you may have read in the New York Times a very excellent op-ed that talked about the United States now moving into a moment of competitive autocracy. And the scholars from Harvard were pointing out how retaliation has been happening against civil society, against protests, against rule of law, and how that's moved us into a very dangerous point in our nation. And it's one that's difficult, but one that we have to face right now as we prepare to celebrate 250 years of our democracy. So what does it look like right now out there? Well, we saw in April at some of the town halls that people were tasered and arrested. We saw people dragged out of town halls in Georgia and New York. Meanwhile, states have been busy passing laws that restrict our right to protest. And recently, in March and April, there are a number of federal bills that have been introduced to restrict the right to protest. Now, this is all happening in a context, right? These bills and laws that are going after our right to protest are happening at a time when the Trump administration is attacking our freedom to learn and read and teach and speak our minds, whether inside universities or libraries, to shelve books that tell us about our American history, including Black history, including Jewish Holocaust remembrance history, including telling the stories of Native American genocide, including talking about the resistance movements upon which our nation has always depended for its freedom and its rights. And right now, people are organizing everywhere. I know down in Alabama, there's a whole bunch of librarians that have gotten together to fight back against book bans. And those things give me hope. And what's important is that so much of this intimidation that's happening really comes down to our decision. Will we stand back or will we step forward? Will we say, I am not going to go along with this and I'm going to speak my mind and find others to do that with as well? So I hope tonight you'll emerge from this training session feeling confident in your right to protest, feeling some guidance. If you've never done a protest, don't worry about it. We're going to show you how. We're going to even hear from Steve Anders, who led such a successful protest in Virginia. He's one of our Democracy Circle leaders, and he's an avid postcarder, and Steve's involved in so much. He's going to tell you what his experience was like organizing a protest. You're going to leave with a sense of what you can do and why we do it. So let's first look at some of the bad news. Next slide. There are a number of pending federal bills attacking the right to protest that have been introduced within the last month or so. Some of these go at real needs to shut down protests on college campuses, such as the one that would block financial aid to students who commit a riot related offense. Whenever you see that word riot, whether it's in a state law or whether it's in a federal law, look for how it's defined. Some of these laws at the state that have tried to use the term riot to encompass peaceful protest have been stopped by injunction. That happened with Florida's law a few years ago, and it was just stopped by a federal injunction. But that's one technique, to use a negative word or the idea that there's terrible unrest and violence, to call it a riot instead of a protest. That's one strategy here. And you're going to see that in a lot of these federal bills. You'll see there are new federal criminal penalties being proposed for protests near pipelines. And you'll see that there are also potential penalties now since March. And again, this is not a law. This is simply a bill that's been introduced in the Senate to make federal accreditation of universities contingent on that university's response to protests. Let's go to the next slide. I want to just get through these quickly to give you a sense of what's brewing at the federal level. But what I want you to keep in mind is that none of these federal bills that I'm mentioning right now have companion bills. Right now, these are being used to message at the state, to tell you and me that we need to be worried out there. We should watch what we're doing. And so we take these bills into account, but we remember they are not law yet. What are some of these? They're saying, well, you can't wear masks or conceal your identity. Some students are being barred from federal student loan forgiveness. And because, there were so many effective protests, particularly against the war in Gaza, where people were blocking the streets, there's also a bill that would create new penalties for protesters. Again, none of these federal bills have companion bills yet, but all of them go after our right to speak our mind in public places, which is guaranteed to us by the First Amendment. Let's quickly look at a few examples of state laws. Now, these are laws. These are not bills. These are laws that have passed, and some of them quite recently. You'll see the state of Arizona just banned the building of protest encampments on university and college campuses. You will see the large number of states that have prohibited protests near critical infrastructure or oil and gas pipelines. You'll see North Dakota itself passed a new criminal penalty for masked protesters with no exemption for health. That was just this past April. And Tennessee has created a new crime where if you approach within 25 feet of a police officer after being warned not to, you will face criminal charges. Now, of course, you can imagine a circumstance where a police officer says, don't approach, and you're trying to clarify something or even provide information. Why do I put all of these laws out there? The point is not to be intimidated, but to be knowledgeable. John, next slide. So what do we do? When we're preparing to plan for a protest, we want to research the laws in our state and in our municipalities. There can be county or local laws. We want to make sensible choices. And of course, we always want to stay peaceful. We want to oppose restrictive laws at the state and federal level, both those that are laws as well as laws that haven't yet come into being, those that are bills. We want to push back against it. And you always want to know your rights. It is a fundamental right for people to be able to gather in public space and protest. This is absolutely central. It is core to the First Amendment, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. The ACLU has a very excellent guide. It is easy to read, and it will allow you some additional information to keep in mind. We're going to send that to you following Effective Advocate in the follow-up email. So whether you're organizing or attending a protest, you will know what your rights are. But what's most important of all, friends, we have to keep protesting. We are not going to concede 1 inch of our public right to assemble and peacefully protest. Okay, next slide. I'm going to turn it over now to Fran, who's going to talk a little bit more about why we protest.
Hi, everyone. I'm Fran. I'm the Senior Social Justice Organizer at the Workers Circle. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, as Noelle was saying, and I'm seeing some people kind of, bring up really important points in the chat, but talk about why we protest. And I'm also going to go over some kind of basic definitions of terminology that can get thrown around a lot at protests so everyone can feel prepared and know what they're getting into when they are thinking about attending a protest or an action. So very basic definition. And I know some of you, like Andrea, might have learned these terms and these ideas since you were a small child, but some people might be newer or could use a little refresher. And I too was brought to protest Occupy Wall Street protests when I was little. So, showing my age there and dating myself. But, we've all come to learn about protests often because of things that we see and that happen in our own local communities. So why do we protest? What even is a protest? A protest is a political demonstration, an action by a mass group or a collection of groups of people in favor of a political or other cause. And they may be protesting against a specific cause of concern. Again, it's a really broad definition. But why do we do it? It makes our issues and our positions known to our elected officials and other people with power in our community. We get to show support for our positions to community members more widely, like I was saying, and it builds power in our communities. There was this question of, is protest effective? Even if your elected officials might not move or change their mind right away, it does show other people in your community that people care about these issues. It can help people feel less alone, less isolated, less afraid to be out there in the streets, showing others that you care about a topic of concern. Can we go to the next slide, please, John? So again, just to kind of go over some of this basic terminology that can be a little overwhelming or a little confusing sometimes if you're just starting to get into this space. So protest, rally, demonstration, these are all common blanket terms for these kinds of public gatherings where people express their political views. Usually at a rally, there's a featured speaker or several featured speakers. A vigil usually means that this gathering is going to be a little more peaceful. It often has a connotation or a purpose of collective mourning. So it will be usually a little more subdued So you know what to expect. A march is, as may be pretty clear, involves walking and a mass formation. There's usually a specific start point and a specific ending point. For example, I was at the May Day march in New York City earlier this month, where we walked from Foley Square to the end point was the Charging Bull statue on Wall Street, to kind of draw attention to the billionaires who are trying to influence our politics and take over our government in so many different ways. And then there's direct action, which is a form of protest that seeks to achieve political goals with actions that disrupt business as usual. So these are some of those actions that Noelle was referring to, like civil disobedience, sit-ins, boycotts, strikes, picket lines, blocking the road, encampments. So usually direct action, it can take a lot of different forms, but usually indicate some kind of a little bit more intense or potentially more disruptive action. So that's always a good thing to know when you're considering, is this the action or protest for me? What are my own, what's my own comfort level with being a part of this protest? So just some good terminology to know. And again, I think it's always good to think about when you're considering attending a protest, like how can I help and plug in? And there are lots of different ways in which, activists like you can contribute. Not everyone has to do everything, but I like to go over what some of these roles could be. There's being a protest organizer, the person who's putting together all the logistics, thinking about where the protest is going to be, who's going to speak, what's the sort of run of show, or what's going to happen at this protest. If it's a march, where are we starting? Where are we ending? All of that. There are people who might be an invited speaker to share about their own experience, their own views. If you are someone with a beautiful voice or who plays a musical instrument, you can be a song leader. Or even if you're just someone who's very loud, it's a really important role to be a chant leader. I'm seeing people laughing and smiling in the chat, and hey, it's a great skill being very loud. Safety marshals are also really important. You might hear these people called safety marshals or just marshals. Those are people who are trained in de-escalation. They try to keep everyone involved in a protest safe. Sometimes they form a barrier between protesters and counter protesters and make sure that everyone is following traffic regulations depending on what's going on at the protest. It's really important when you go to a protest to know who the safety marshals are. Often they're wearing some kind of bright safety vest, like a yellow vest or an orange vest, and they'll often point you in the right direction if you're marching or moving at all. There's also legal observers who wear green hats. You can do a special training to be a legal observer. If you're curious about any of these roles, I suggest you can look it up, or maybe ask in the chat. There might be people who've held these roles before. Being a media liaison means that you're comfortable talking to the press and have been kind of confirmed with the people who organize the protest, that you are kind of comfortable representing the views of the group and ready to do that. Some people, like to take on that role. Other people might never want to talk to the press. So that's something to think about if you're going to a protest. There's a loud siren in the background here. Being a police liaison, speaking of sirens, is another important role, which has to do with identifying yourself as a point person for police who might be present at your protest. And having someone designated to speak to the police can help keep other protesters safe and make sure that people at the protest are just communicating with police to avoid, hopefully, any confrontations. And again, there's some more logistical roles as well. If you're someone who's really good with AV, who knows how to set up a microphone, that's great. You can be an equipment organizer. You can also be an accessibility coordinator, which can mean just making sure that everyone who might have access needs will be able to participate in your protest. This might mean setting up chairs for people who can't stand for a long time, laying out water bottles or snacks so that people, have something to keep them going during a long protest. You can also be a super volunteer, which is a term I've seen in some spaces, meaning someone who just shows up early and says, hey, what can I do? Can I lend a hand? Do you need someone to help with anything that's going on? And of course, you can attend, you can show up, you can get out there in the streets and invite others. So that was a lot of information, but those are a lot of the different roles that you all can take. And I think actually if we...
Oh, I was just going to say, can we go back to that slide before? I wanted to appreciate something you had on there, which was being a super volunteer, because there are a lot of last minute things that need to come together when you're doing a protest, and to have an extra pair of hands and someone who says, oh, I'm willing. And it might be, can you, oh my goodness, the flyers are in the car. Can you run and get those flyers, can make all the difference. Just having people greet other people in a warm and friendly manner when people arrive sets the tone and the spirit for the event. And I'm so glad that you gave this full range of ways that people can plug in. Not every protest is going to be this complex that you have a lot of equipment or even necessarily a police liaison or anything like that. Sometimes they're going to be small protests, but remember, small can also be very powerful. Right now, our rights are under attack in all kinds of ways. And what is so important isn't just like the next big protest in New York City or LA or Chicago, or as important as those massive numbers are, it's important to protest in Eugene, Oregon. It's important to protest in Palatka, Florida. It's important to protest in Paducah, Kentucky. It's important to protest, where I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey. This where we live, we have the relationships, and often relationships of trust with individuals and organizations who will help make our protest full and powerful. So thank you, Fran.
Yeah, and if I can just come up for one more moment, I just wanted to second what Noelle said, that I was laying out all the possible roles that could exist at a really big protest where you're expecting a lot of people. Like, again, not every protest is going to have all of these roles, but it could also be helpful to reach out, or if you're part of the organizing team, to bring up that you have some of these skills in case they need it. So just wanted to echo that as well, and to invite people to put in the chat if there's any of these roles that you feel particularly drawn to or that you've held before. Would be curious to know what people's experiences have been. I know I like to be a song leader. I like to be a safety marshal, and you also don't have to do the same thing every time. And there could be different times in your life when you're more prepared or more ready to do one role, and then another time you might want a different role. So feel free to share in the chat. Would love to see what people think as we continue on with our training.
So say you want to host a protest. How do you get started with this? First, you want to decide on the kind of protest you want to hold. And from that, a lot of things follow. For example, if you want to have a march that goes from one town to another, that's going to be one kind of protest. If you want to have a candlelight vigil, and by the way, just flagging, some places are leery of candles these days. Think of electric candles, or also, the cell phones that are so ubiquitous. So decide on the kind of protest you want to have. Some of you may or may not have engaged in civil disobedience. I want to set that protest aside for tonight because that really does require some careful preparation and discussion. Some of you who are veterans with that can add your comments in the chat. I've been involved in many different civil disobedience actions where you deliberately and peacefully break a law in order to draw attention to injustice. But then part of civil disobedience is being willing to accept the punishment for that transgression. And of course, where was this so beautifully exemplified but in civil rights protests, right? And so we think of that historic march in Selma. We think of students at sit-ins. We think of the courage that it took to not respond to evil with evil or hate with hate. And so civil disobedience takes preparation. It takes clarity. You need to have a lawyer that you should consult with for those things, and you should really think it through. As you're deciding on the type of protest, some other things you might want to keep in mind. Who is going to be participating in this protest? If you are part of a community where you have a large number of undocumented people who are a part of that community, you will want to take particular precautions and make sure that when you're laying out the protest plans, that everyone understands what they're being invited to consider. And many immigrant rights groups are constantly in consultation with their own legal counsel around how best to make our voices heard without putting people in maximum jeopardy. Of course, at this point, we know that ICE is collaborating and cooperating with a lot of local police departments. And whether you are undocumented or you're here with a visa, or even if you're a US citizen, these risks of being interrupted by ICE or police have really gone kind of high in recent days. We've seen terrible situations of a US child being deported against the wishes of the father. We've seen immigrants who have been abducted, removed. It's a time when we need to be aware and we need to estimate what we think could happen in a reasonable way and make an informed decision about what our next step will be. So as you're deciding on the type of protest, consider where you're going to have it. You want to decide on your location. Public venues are wonderful. In many cases, you do not need a permit to gather in a park or on a sidewalk or outside government buildings, but you don't want to impede access. That's the really important feature. If there's a lot of you and you're on a skinny sidewalk somewhere, you want to keep moving and you want to make sure people can get by if they need to. Now, sometimes you will need a permit. And the best way to find out if a permit is required is that you can take a look at your local sheriff's office, your town's website often will have information about this. Those permits are not necessarily very hard to get, nor are they very expensive. If expense is an issue under the First Amendment, you have a right to not pay for that permit, by the way. ACLU promises us that. So what you do then is you look and download the form and you fill it out, and the permit might have to do with the size of the crowd you expect, with the kind of action you're taking. If you expect to do a march in a street or you want streets blocked off, then the police also want to make sure that you're safe and others who aren't in the protest are safe. And so permits can often be a part of that mix. If you're planning a long march that maybe goes from one town to another town, you may be crossing multiple police districts. And keep in mind that if you're in the street and moving a lot of people, you're probably going to have permits for every police district you cross. Now, the permit can also have to do with sound. If you're setting up sound equipment or you're going to project music very loudly, you often need some kind of permit. Not all the time, but often. If you are just using a bullhorn or you don't have amplification, typically a permit is not needed at all. The other consideration you obviously want to keep in mind is in your community, is law enforcement particularly aggressive toward protests? What have you seen? What's your experience? Are they supportive? Have you worked with police in the past? Has somebody in your group perhaps had some experience, or do they have a relationship with someone in the public safety office? Establishing a liaison with the police who is consistent from permit through the end of a protest is exceedingly important so that you have one spokesperson who is clear about what has been agreed to and can speak for the group. Because if you have a whole bunch of people, no, we have a right to this, we have a right to that, it creates chaos rather than clarity. Next slide. You'll want to decide on how many marshals you need. If you're doing a long march, you may need a lot. If you're crossing multiple streets, things like that. If you're having a gathering in a park, you may not need marshals for that because it's just a group that's together. Think about health and safety for the people that are gathering. So if you're planning an all-day Saturday afternoon protest, and this is wonderful. I know we heard about a protest on Rehoboth Beach the last time we were here. It was very exciting. Um, if you're planning an all-day protest and people are going to be out in the really hot sun, be mindful. Is there a place where people can get shade? Have a lot of water on hand. Certainly encourage people to bring their own, but have some on hand. If you are in a public area, make sure you know where the bathrooms are. If you're planning a protest of hundreds, you might want to rent some porta potties and make sure that that is available to everyone. If you're undertaking something that involves a march or physical hardship of some kind, you probably will want to have a volunteer medical professional, maybe a doctor or a nurse on hand. I know when I've done long marches with groups, we've often had a doctor or nurse with us over multiple day marches to attend to feet, to help take people's blood pressure, and to troubleshoot anything that may happen. Now, if you're planning a protest that is just, an hour long somewhere, you're not probably going to need a doctor or nurse. So obviously this is depending on the kind of protest. The other thing to keep in mind is how can you make it maximally accessible to all who want to participate, right? Can everybody get to it? Is there a place for parking? Is public transport near? How might somebody who uses a wheelchair participate? If you're holding a march, where should all the children in wheelchairs be? Should they be in the front or mixed up with people? What's a safer arrangement? You want to think those things through. You want to make sure that, especially for accessibility reasons, you want to have some sidewalks or flat surfaces where people can move with ease. Next slide. You really want to decide importantly on the tone of protests. Some people think protests are all about yelling in the streets. Sure, a spirit of chant in the street and being upset about injustice is perfectly legit. But there are other forms of protests, right? There can be silent protests. There can be protests that are jubilant with the kind of world we want to create. There are protests that are family friendly. And I really want to encourage you to think about that because small children are such an important part of our community. How can you involve children to elders in the protests that you're doing? You want to communicate, rain or shine. Is this going to be, because if people don't know, then they don't know, and they may choose not to show up. So let them know if it's rain or shine. If you have an alternative location in event of bad rain, then you let them know what it is ahead of time. You'll want to also be very clear about your messaging. Remember, when you're in a public place, there's all sorts of people that are going by. They're going to see your process and they'll be like, hey, what's going on there? Can you read that? I don't know. It's some sign about democracy. I don't know. Who are they for or against democracy? So you want to have your mainline message and you want to have it out there as much as you can with signs. As you're determining who's going to be speaking, think about people that will provide a breadth of voices. The more voices and different approaches to talking about our rights at this time are really, really valuable. And think about the connections you have. Maybe you know a librarian, or you know a member of the clergy, or maybe you're somebody who does chalk art. There's all sorts of ways that you can bring diversity of speakers and visuals into this protest space. If you are feeling like this is going and you have a little bit of time and you want some press, it's great to do a short press release with your main message, the date, the time, the location. You want to say if there are key participants in that protest and any visuals. I know in one of my work with farm workers, we once built a gigantic pyramid of 32-pound red buckets that farm workers use to haul tomatoes. And that visual was really stunning because that pyramid showed how many tons of tomatoes it took to earn the minimum wage. It was 2 tons, 2 tons. And so we demonstrated that through this immense visual and built it on site with ladders. So think about your visuals and the artists who may be among you. Next step. Next slide, please. Thanks. Of course, get the word out, tell everybody, email, social, word of mouth, make flyers, go to your neighborhood businesses and say, we're having democracy visuals this coming Sunday at the beach. You know, could you post this in your coffee house? Get the word out. Also plan ahead to have designated people who will document your protests. You don't want to be on site saying, oh gosh, did anybody take pictures, right? So you'll want somebody doing your social media, and Rita is going to talk about that. You'll want to have somebody doing filming of what's going on and photography as well. Of course, you want to confirm everybody beforehand. And in terms of press, whoever is the point of contact for your press release, that person should be the press contact at the event. Next slide, please. One of the greatest things you can do is really meet with people ahead of time. So if you're the police liaison, you want to get there ahead so that you can greet the security officers that come, reaffirm all the agreements that you've put in place. If you're coming and an organizer, you want to make sure you have all your speakers together before it starts and say hello to them and introduce them to each other. If you have marshals, you want to refresh or train them on site so they know how to carry out their functions. If you are the press liaison, take a big pole and put a sign that says press on it so press can find you at the event and greet them. Know your rights. Again, we're going to send you the ACLU's guide. And finally, be sure to clean up after. I know that sounds sort of crazy, but you want to really take a look and not leave, you know, half drunk water bottles on the ground and this and that. I'm going to pause now and just invite Steve Anders to join me and just talk a little bit about, Steve, your experience. I know you were one of the Light for Our Democracy protest organizers. How did it go? What was on your mind as you prepared for that protest, which you prepared pretty quickly?
Yeah, thanks, Noelle. This slide was these slides are great. Kind of wish I had them, so you all have the benefit that I didn't have. I did have a great toolkit from the Workers Circle. Yeah, and I led a protest the night of the president's speech to Congress, and I was a total newbie. So I guess I'm here to represent that even newbies can do this as well. I do have a democracy circle. It has about 150 people on it. And what motivated me to move to the next step is I always tell them, like, get out of your comfort zone. Do more than you're doing already. If you're postcarding, do phone calling. If you're doing phone calling, try canvassing. And so I figured I should take a dose of my own medicine. And like, I've never done something like this before. It's not my comfort zone. I'm kind of an introvert, but I can do this too. And I can move to that next step. What did I do to plan the rally? First, I had to get my gumption up. I mean, I had to like, this is not something I'm really comfortable doing, but I need to do this. This is no time to be comfortable. That's what I tell my friends, and I figured I should, again, do that myself. I did follow the playbook that the Workers Circle put out. And again, the slides that you all went through this evening are perfect. I think they'll be a great compliment to any tool playbook that's out there. And I also enlisted a bunch of friends to be my supporters, to give me courage. I thought about a lot of those roles that Fran had on her slide, so make note of those. One friend offered to bring a guitar and sing some peace songs and some protest songs as people were assembling. What a great idea. It worked out really well. One offered to be the de-escalation person in case someone in the crowd got rowdy, and that didn't happen. It was all very peaceful. Someone offered to be the police liaison if the police showed up. Again, good to be prepared, but that didn't happen. We just have our own space. So anybody who's listening to the presentation tonight, again, it doesn't have to be confrontational, right? It can be peaceful. It can be all very, chill, as our protest was. And I did come up with a plan, again, as mentioned in the slides. I sort of look, every few minutes, like what was going to happen minute by minute and who was going to speak and how it would play out. So at least I was prepared for that. If you've never done this before, what would I suggest to you? First of all, it's super easy. The suggestion that was given to me was post it on Mobilize, which is what I did. And I found out you post it on Mobilize and people will come. I thought like 5 or 10 of my friends might show up. We had over 100 people there, mostly all from Mobilize. It was great. I didn't expect that. Mobilize will tell you as people sign up. So I was prepared for a larger turnout. One thing I wish I had known was to turn off those alerts. So because every time someone signed up, I would get an email. So all day long, I'm getting an email. Somebody signed up. I'd rather look at the end or halfway through the day than the constant emails. Use a toolkit if one's provided to you. Like I said, the Workers Circle had a great one. The Center of Common Ground I know has toolkits, and I just followed their instructions. I made it very easy. You can start small. That's the other piece of advice. Like I said, we had 100 people. That was bigger than I thought, but it wasn't some massive protest with thousands of people, which worked out really well for me and my style. And finally, the best part is, even as an introvert, it felt really good. It felt really good to be surrounded by 100 people that all thought the way I thought. And they saw the community, and so many people were coming up to me saying, I'm so happy I'm not the only one feeling this way. And that was, to me, the biggest takeaway, is that they were happy that I was there. They were happy that their other people were there they didn't know. They met a lot of new people. And they were really thankful that this made them feel better. So that's, I guess that's probably the biggest thing I'll ask you to take away from this is, you'll feel good, you'll be doing some good, and you'll help other people feel better. Thanks.
Steve, my goodness, getting up the gumption to do it, enjoying it, knowing that your friends so offer to help, meeting new people. One of the most wonderful things was just seeing the photo of that protest, which, as you said, you didn't know how it was going to grow. And look at all those people that came. There are people out there hoping that one of us will get the ball rolling. Maybe they don't have the courage to do it yet, but that's okay. They're ready to come. And then once they come, maybe they'll help with the next one. One of the things at a protest you can do that's really useful is pass around a sign-in sheet. Give people the opportunity to be connected with you and one another, particularly if you're doing it under the auspices of an organization. And that's a great way to stay in touch with people. Steve, I want to ask a question. What was the thing you were most nervous of in the lead up, and did it come to pass?
I guess I was most nervous that it would get unruly and like the police would show up or something, and none of that happened. Again, as you all suggested, people were sort of organically were sort of circulating. My friends were circulating when people walked up. They'd say hello to them, and just sort of get that chill vibe. And like, we're not here to like foot stomp. There were a couple people that were, very progressive that wanted to get up on the platform and really want to make a stand. It's like, that's not what tonight is about. There's another place for that. So I think that's the biggest thing is like, whoa, there are going to be so many people there, I'm going to lose control. But it didn't happen. And everybody was so supportive that, I had a group of 100 people that all thought the way I thought. So I didn't need to worry about that.
Yeah. Steve, you're raising a really important point, and I saw in the chat, I'm terrible friends at watching the chat and like doing what I'm doing. I can't do two things at once, but a couple folks were mentioning about protesters that might come or commandeer the mic and really be off message. And one of the most important things, if you're the organizer, really be the organizer. Do not shy away from that. You can be a quiet person and still be the organizer. This doesn't mean yelling at people. It means controlling the microphone, having a plan, knowing who is speaking. And also, frankly, if you don't know the person and you don't feel comfortable saying, I'm sorry, we have an established set of speakers tonight. And just you keep control of it. If someone takes that mic, and sometimes it can happen, and uses it to convey a message that your protest is not about, it's your responsibility as the organizer to go and get that mic back peacefully, to thank and appreciate that the person has some very strong opinions, Tonight, we are here too, and you get your main message right back out there. Do not allow someone to derail. Steve, anything else you want to say that's come to mind to friends here on the call?
Again, I think those roles that are on that slide, I hadn't thought of that, but people reached out to me and said, I can be the singer, I can be the de-escalation person. Like, oh, I didn't know I needed all that. As the leader, I agree with what you said, Noel, like you are implicitly in charge. And so you have this aura of, being in charge. So even if someone does take the microphone, again, you're the person in charge, you should be able to get it back. But just I felt better having people in those roles so that I didn't have to worry about that.
Yes.
As I was speaking, I could focus on speaking. And, as I was talking, I saw a police officer walk across, the back of the crowd. Well, he was just going to his car, but the police liaison went over and I saw him in the corner of my eye go talk to him. So I didn't need to worry about that. I think was probably a key thing. So again, the slide that talked about the roles, I think is pretty critical.
Steve,
And again, if it's a small thing, you probably don't, like Francisco said, you don't need all those roles. Like we were there for an hour on a cool evening. We didn't need a doctor, Like if you think about what you're going to be doing and what roles you may need, listing that, getting those people to support you ahead of time is key.
Steve, we can't thank you enough for sharing your experience, for all the way that you said to yourself and to everyone, this is no time to be comfortable. This government right now is counting on the fact that we're going to be fearful. But remember, Audre Lorde put it in her wonderful poem that we can be fearful and keep walking forward, right? We can manage both things at once. We can be a novice and not quite be sure and continue to move forward. We can make that decision to continue to exercise the rights that are truly ours. Steve, thank you so much for doing that protest and really sharing from your heart and experience. We deeply appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm going to
thank you
pass
so much.
the mic over to Rio, who's going to give us a concrete example of a protest that you can plan that has a lot of supports already built into it. You heard Steve talk about the toolkit that we provided. Well, there's going to be a protest coming up January the 14th called the No Kings Day. Rio, take it away.
Sure thing. It's June 14th. I'm sure there'll be another one on January 14th.
Oh, did I say January? Oh my goodness, it's late.
No worries.
June 14th.
I can't believe it's already May 15th now, which is hard to believe. Thank you so much, Noel. Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, everyone, for being on the call tonight. I'm Rio Tazwell. I'm an organizer and consultant with the Workers Circle. And just want to share a little bit about the next big protest. I'm sure many of you have heard about this already. No Kings coming up on June 14th. This really is the continuation of the growing resistance that thankfully is taking root during this second terrible Trump administration. With Trump 1, the resistance was born on day 1 with the Women's March, and it was absolutely incredible to witness that type of resistance just mobilize overnight. This time around, took a little bit longer for folks to get in gear. I think a lot of us had to kind of shake off just the utter shock of what happened last November. But I'm sure many of you saw and were a part of the massive hands-off protests last month. And that really has kicked off an ongoing series of mass mobilizations. It continued earlier this month with May Day. And now the next big one that Center for Common Ground and the Workers Circle is a part of with many national partners, Indivisible, Move On, Big Labor, big environmental groups, all types of organizations are collaborating to do it again, potentially even bigger, this time under the banner of No Kings. I feel like the name needs no explanation. The man in the White House clearly does not understand or care for the Constitution and wants to be an autocrat. He wants to be a monarch. So we are here to tell him that he is not a king. And June 14th has some significance. As you may know, it's actually the 250th anniversary of really the country, but I think technically the United States Army is celebrating their 250th anniversary. It's also right around Trump's birthday. And so he has made it clear that he wants to have a massive military parade in Washington, D.C., which is, of course, not like anything that's ever happened before, and not like anything that a modern democracy would do. But nonetheless, he wants to do it. And so we are having this protest on that day all across the country. As you can see here, I believe we're up to over 700 events now nationwide. Very deliberately not in Washington, D.C. So there is not going to be a major mobilization on June 14th in D.C. because we don't want to create a conflict with the military parade. So it's very strategic that we're not there that day. But as you can see, almost everywhere else in every major city and states across the country, lots of small towns and areas in between. And it's still growing. It's still over a month away, just about exactly a month away, up to 700 events now, hundreds of thousands. The past protests have seen millions of people turn out. So we're very confident that over the next month or so that this protest will continue to pick up steam and gather momentum. So definitely take some time to check out the website. I will also just quickly show a couple other tabs here. Hopefully my share screen follows along. Can you also see the screen here? You can see that Center for Common Ground is a partner, the Worker Circle is a partner, dozens of other groups are collaborating to make this happen. And there's a lot of different ways to plug in. And so really quickly, I want to jump over to the toolkit. Hopefully you can still see my screen here. But this is for folks that want to potentially sign up as a host. And so this is easily found via the website. You can just click on the toolkit tab. You can read more about the theory of the protest, the messaging, the state of play, all stuff that we're pretty familiar with, but really helpful if you're gonna buckle down and organize to kind of read up on the background and why we're doing this and why this day and then what we're hoping to accomplish. Lots of really helpful information. One key thing to consider is to make sure that there's not already a No Kings protests organized in your area. We and the organizers really want to make sure that we are building up the ones that are already on the map as much as possible. And we don't want to compete with ourselves by having lots of smaller events in one area when we could just be combining efforts and having many very, very large events. So be sure to check and make sure that there's not an event already in your area. If there is not one in your area, absolutely would encourage you to register your own event, and there's instructions for how to do that here. There's different types of events, as I think Fran was describing earlier, all different types of protests. That is true. Again, with No Kings, it can be a march, it can be a rally, it can just be a visibility action. And then lots of messaging resources here as you do outreach, some great graphics and posters that you can print off and encourage people to bring to your event. Important information about security is a very big priority, especially for some of these bigger events. Information about insurance, also important for some of these bigger events. Great resources for de-escalation and knowing your rights, linked to here. And then a number of upcoming resources, given that it's still a month out, office hours for hosts to log in and ask questions from organizers, safety and security trainings, and then media advisory and press release support as well. And then yeah, just some more step-by-step instructions here to really just give you all the tools that you need to organize and recruit for and promote a successful No Kings event. So
I want
definitely
to jump in for a second, Rio, and say this can look overwhelming because there's a lot of words on this page, but it's not that complicated. Trust me, when you get out there, you'll be able to see the headers and you can go to those parts that look good for you. And the other thing I just want to throw in the end here is that you can do these protests in public parks and other places. You can also do them on private property that you own. Say you're here and you belong to a congregation, and a congregation wants to have some kind of event on their front lawn as part of No Kings Day. That's their property. If there is proper approval for that with the congregation, you can use the congregation's front lawns. I'm mentioning that because we got a lot of well-placed congregations out there, especially in small towns all across America that are right on Main Street. And there's a lot of traffic and a lot of people that go by. Thank you so much for going over the No King's Day protest on June 14th. We hope that you'll participate by organizing a protest or going to a protest near you. We will be sending those links out. And before we turn it to Andrea, any last word, Rio?
Yeah, I was just going to really quick over some best practices for using social media to organize and promote your event. I'll try to be super, super quick. I mean, I think the first thing is really just to do a landscape analysis of, who you are working with, what platforms they use, if there's any organizations that maybe have large social media accounts that are going to be promoting the event, and making sure that you're tagging them in any posts that you're putting out about the event, along with, of course, the logistics, the time, location, the route, any other details that you want to make sure people know so they can show up to the protest. And crucially, if you're organizing it yourself, a way for people to RSVP. I think that's really, really important. And start promoting it early and often across all the social media platforms that you're on. Be sure to do research about relevant hashtags. Often large protests will have a hashtag associated with them, which helps the algorithm find that content and push it out to more people who might be interested in it. And encourage people who are attending to also post and to use the hashtag leading up to the event to get as many RSVPs as possible. And then while you're there, you want to document it. If you can live stream it, that's great. Take lots of pictures and post it in real time, but then also you can save it to post as a recap later. But if there are any speakers, you can share about what people are talking about. You can interview people, get little anecdotes from people to share on social media in real time or after the fact, and really try to use your social media as a storytelling platform, why you're there, why other people are there, and why people at home should care about why this protest is happening. And again, multimedia really helps with engagement, photos and video. And then try to collaborate with others. If you know others are going to be there and documenting it on social media, tag each other, amplify each other's posts, comment, like, share. All of that helps generate engagement and more reach, which can ultimately help us be more impactful in our protests. So I'll keep it at that. Just keep it tight because I know we're running a little over. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Rio. We really appreciate those tips. And I'm going to kick it over to Andrea.
Thank you. I'm going to bring up one last speaker. It looks like she's here. This is going to be fairly quick. This will be Janice Gay, who is our Virginia Beach Democracy Center leader. And Janice has gone to a lot of town halls, and there have been some very interesting things. So Janice, unmute.
All right, thank you so much, Andrea. Yes, the last town hall I went to was a listening town hall that was held in Norfolk. We had some congressmen there. Congressman Meeks was there. Congressman Bobby Scott was there, and a host of legislators. It was very powerful because they listened to the people in the audience speak from different communities, whether they was from Norfolk, Portsmouth, Virginia Beach, the local areas. You had a lot of military families, wives, you had people who own small businesses and church leaders that were present. And they were able to listen to some of the things that we're already currently doing on the ground, like canvassing. And we're actually hosting events on college campuses and talking to people in the community, helping to feed people in the community, as well as build these hubs that kind of offer different services through mutual aid within the communities that we serve already. So it was very powerful, impactful. They were able to listen and engage with the audience, which was something different. They heard so many different things that we're looking to do, bonding together and wanting to be a part of it. So it was very impactful, the listening town hall meeting that we had.
Thank you, Janice. And as we get ready to let you go, for the evening. Oh, great. There are all my slides. The Virginia, we are having our statewide elections and all 100 of our House of Delegate seats in 2025. So we are currently running phone banks. You can go to the Mobilize page and sign up, or if you want to look and see where are we making calls, you can go to our website, centerforcommonground.org/phone bank. Also, well, one more thing about these Virginia primaries. There are very few primaries in Virginia. Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General on the Democratic side, and there are really about only 12 delegate primaries in the state. For the first time in recent or even far memory, Virginia has a Democratic candidate for all 100 House districts. Normally, we have about 10, 12 districts where there's only one party's candidate running. This is very, very different this year. So we are very, very, very excited about this. If you go to our website, I'll put the Mobilize link in mobilize.us/CFCG-ROV. That's where you can go. We do training on our phone banks. They're every Tuesday and Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. There will be other phone banks because this year we have a dialer. So if you like manual phone banks where you're calling from your computer, yes, but you decide when you make the calls. The Tuesday and Thursday phone banks are for you. We will be introducing phone banks on another day. That will be our power dialer. So if you are a power phone banker and you want to just talk to people and leave messages, we leave messages, you'll be able to do that with our power dialer. There will be an update on what's going on with the Virginia primaries on June 5th. Our meetings are at 8 p.m., so you're going to have to stay up a little bit longer. I hope I'll be able to stay up. And then democracy circles, build your democracy circle. That will be June 10th at 7 p.m. And in June, we will, of course, be doing Effective Advocate. That will be June 12th at 7 p.m. So please, please, please join us for these future events. We love having you with us. So everybody, thank you so very much for joining. Have a fantastic day.
And go out and do some protesting. Large or
Right.
small, it doesn't matter. Remember, thieves, we have an obligation to not remain comfortable in this time. We can do it. Steve did it. So can you. We believe in you and can't wait to see you next month at Effective Advocate. Bring a friend. Take care, everybody.
There were great questions and comments in the chat. Hopefully we got to all of them. Thank you everyone who was participating there. Great to see you all.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.